Hello to all the beautiful people, the ugly ones too. A quick update on my eye surgery. So, my right eye got left, meaning it is out of the danger, and my left eye is alright if that makes sense. But because the bacteria is still present in the back of my right eye, I still have to be in the hospital, which drives me crazy. But, anyways, I promised you some nice tricks in the Portuguese Gambit classical variation. So to get this on the board, you need to play for the modern Scandinavian, and according to some chess experts on the internet, pawn to d4 here is the only sensible way of continuing for white. Now we can play bishop to g4, hit their queen, and what do they do? Well, on my channel in the past I covered the line with pawn to f3, where you get to see some really crazy chess positions. But in today's video, it is all about the classical variation with knight to f3. If you look at some videos that are already on YouTube explaining this opening, everybody seems to be talking about queen captures here, knight to c6, pawn to e5 at some point, getting long castle, and hope to equalize and perhaps get some trap on the board. Well, this is going to be my take on the Portuguese Gambit classical variation, and I dare to say that I found a rather forcing way of getting just so much more tricky positions. And the whole video is just going to be a showcase of positions where white is messing up in pretty much all the lines. So without any further ado, let's dive right into this. Whoop! Sorry about that. Let's start by turning on the engine, as I would like to keep it on for the rest of the video so you can follow which are the engine suggestions, and on the right side you get to see what are the actual most played moves with their corresponding win rates. So right here the engine would like us to capture on d5 with the queen, but screw that. I would really like to suggest the move bishop captures on f3. A little bit of a counterintuitive move as we are giving up the bishop pair, but you will get the point in a while. Of course, they are going to recapture with the queen. Nobody would like to, stack their pawns like Matryoshka here. And this is where we are going to capture the pawn on d5 and basically propose a queen trade right in the opening, which may also appear not a great way of playing, but just trust me on this one. So they should be capturing the queen. The secondary move is bishop to e2. We will get to that later. Yeah, but the best thing for them to do is go ahead and accept the queen exchange, and after we capture with the knight, the most played move here is pawn to c4, a very typical move that white players play against us in the modern Scandinavian, where usually they are harassing our queen, but now they are harassing our knight. It doesn't really make a difference for them what they harass. They just want to grab some space, and it looks like such a natural and logical move. And the secondary move that I will be looking at is bishop to c4 later. So let's start with pawn to c4. Well, this actually gives us the option to play an amazing move, knight to b4. Knight to b4 got to be my favorite move to play in any modern Scandinavian variations, and the reason is people are just not ready to handle this move. And look at the win rates. So as you can see, the most correct move is to move their lazy ass king and cover the c2 square with king to d1, but 80% of the time people are going to play knight to a3. Makes a lot of sense covering the c2 with their knight, but already this move gives a little bit edge to black. So we can continue here with the knight to c6. Now we are attacking the d4 pawn, and again, the optimal way would be to defend with bishop to e3, but most guys are playing bishop to d2. Well, this makes sense as well, as now we cannot capture the pawn because we would hang our knight, but just a simple pawn to e6 allows our bishop to guard our knight. Now we are once again threatening to capture on d4. So what are they going to do about this? Well, It's ridiculous, but the most played move here is bishop to e2. What a stupid move, just hanging the pawn completely and actually just destroying their whole position. And this is not even like some noobs playing this. These are 2400s. Anyways, after capturing on d4, we are once again threatening to fork them, and here we shall witness some hilarious attempts by white to keep things under control. So, for example, they play bishop to c3. I mean, like, are you forking? Kidding me? Let me fork you, kid, and we will be winning the rook just like this, with a winning position. Then some other moves include bishop captures on b4, trying to get rid of one of the annoying knights, but this exchange is just never gonna be good for them. As you can see, the evaluation is -3 point something, and the win rates are just like 90%. And then there is the most logical move, bishop to d1, so trying to stop the forking with the light square bishop. Unfortunately, this move gives away the control of the d3 square, so we are immediately going to go knight to d3 check, king is forced to f1, and now rather than capturing on b2, the stronger move is actually to get long castled and go for this nice rook alignment with all these other pieces. And here, after pretty much anything they play, well, I mean, the b2 pawn is hanging, so I guess they are likely to play bishop to c3. We will play bishop to c5, and here is where I wanted to say, after anything that they play, let's see the correct move here. We are able to capture the pawn on f2, and after they capture, we have knight to b5, discard check, and now we will simply abuse the fact that this poor hard-working pawn is just overloaded with its duty, and after we capture the bishop, now the other piece is hanging. Alright, keep this tactic in mind. It is going to be occurring many more times in this opening. Let's go back. How about they try to protect the b2 pawn with their rook? Well, here we can go ha ha ha. And after they capture, we go ha ha ha. And after they move their rook back, we can even go ha ha ha. And after they capture this, we capture their dark square bishop, ending up in a much more active position, even though the material is equal when it comes to pieces. We are, of course, up 2 pawns and we are crushing here. Okay, guys, let's go back. So this was all after they played this ridiculous blunder of bishop to e2, not caring about their d4 pawn. What is the second most played move here? It is bishop to c3. So they are trying to hold on to the pawn, which is like a nice idea, but it is also not the correct move. Here we are going to get long castle, putting more pressure on the d pawn, and most guys are going to respond with getting castle themselves, which not only hang their pawn on a2, so we grab that with a check, but as you can see, once again, their pawn is overloaded. So after we capture the bishop on c3 and they capture this, we are capturing the free knight here. But wait a minute, they can capture with the king. Well, this is not going to make things better for them. Here we throw in bishop to b4 check. They are going to go to b3. And now there are two moves that you can play. Like, the safer option is to just go ahead and capture the knight and win another pawn on d4, resulting in a winning position. But even better thing you can do is to capture with the knight right away. It is a check. It gives them the option to blunder with king captures the bishop, in which case you go knight to c6 check. Yes, it is a sick check because you are winning the rook on the next turn. So they cannot really capture the bishop, they have to capture the knight. Now you capture the rook, and it looks like you are just, hanging the bishop for free, where in the first variation you at least traded it for the knight. But this is actually even stronger for black. because you are going to put your rook on their back rank, and now their only hope to finish the development is of course to push this g-pawn and move the bishop here, here, so they can trade the rooks. But by the time they accomplish this, they are going to keep all their pawns on dark squares, and you are just simply going to win a whole bunch of their pawns, as there is no way for them to hold on to them, and you will be up quite a number of pawns, and this is even stronger according to the engine. Alright, let's rewind this to the point where they got castled. So we got castled and they got castled to, preserve the d-pawn, which turned out to be wrong. The second most played move here is bishop to e2, again a terrible move, hanging the d-pawn, and on top of everything here they are going to exchange the knight for the bishop, and in panic mode they are going to get castled, which allows our rook to get on the second rank very active. They are going to have to move their bishop as it was hanging, and we get to activate all of our pieces in such a way that we are going to be targeting the f2 pawn. So here, for example, knight to b5, we are going to play knight to d3, and there is no way for them to stop us from capturing here, and we have a great position being already up 2 pawns. Okay, so this is not really playable for them. This bishop to e2 idea never works. The most correct move here is the third most played one, and it is simply a rook to d1, holding on to the d pawn, but effectively losing the a pawn. So we are going to grab this, and not only we are already having a great position, on top of everything, again they are going to misjudge this position, and they are going to go for bishop to e2 or pawn to d5 or some other move, not realizing just how hard working this poor pawn is, and we are immediately going to abuse that, capture the bishop, get them doubled pawns, so now the poor pawn is having his head stuck in the other pawns, but life is hard sometimes. And after that we are going to just, of course, grab this free knight with a crushing position. Okay, let's go back. I believe this will conclude all the traps that can arise from them playing the most played move, bishop to d2 here. And now let's have a look at the second most played move, and that is bishop to e3. So holding on to the d4, very nice idea, very good, white people. Let's see these variations. So here, of course, we are going to continue with our simple plan. We will push pawn to e6, and you can notice in many lines, like knight to b5 is the correct move that they should be playing. This move doesn't get played at all, as you can see. It has been played twice, for example, and even less frequently in other variations where the knight is needed on b5. But anyways, let's see just how they mishandle this again. For example, in this position, there is again bishop to e2. We are going to get castled here, putting pressure on d pawn, and now most guys are going to get short castled. And once again we are free to capture the d pawn with the pressure on the light square bishop. Most guys are going to capture the knight. We will recapture with the rook, and look at this. Now they are playing knight to b5, but this is already too late, and maybe you are already recognizing this position as it is very familiar to what we had before. They are playing bishop to f3 here, and now we can simply go for example, bishop to c5, and after something like pawn to a3 we don't even mind, as we wanted to move the knight to d3 anyways, with so much pressure against f2 pawn that they cannot just bear this. Okay guys, let's go back. If they play more correctly, they will get a long castle here. That is the second most played move. In this case, they are once again at least hanging the a pawn. So we are going to grab this, and after they move the king, you can do a bunch of things here. For example, you can go ahead and capture this knight on a3, hoping for them to blunder and capture the bishop, which is wrong because they get forked. So they would have to actually capture the knight here. But you don't have to do that. You can simply move your knight back and you can be pretty much up one healthy pawn. Let's go back. So this happened after they played bishop to e2. The second most played move is if they get castled immediately. Well, this one is rather similar. You are going to grab d3 a2 pawn. They have to move their king, and you can either go for the same trick with bishop captures on a3, or you can just move your knight back to b4, and in this case most guys continue with pawn to d5, which just makes things worse for them because you can get castled. Now they cannot even capture anything here because this is pinned, and well, yeah, you are going to be probably winning some center pawns here. Okay, let's go back. I believe this concludes all the traps where they play either bishop to d2 or bishop to e3. Let's have a look at the third most played option, and it is pawn to d5. So after pawn to d5, you are going to, of course, jump with the knight to d4, threatening to fork them from the c2 square, and this time they have nothing better but to move their king to d1 to cover the c2 square. Well, you can continue with pawn to e6. Now, in the ideal scenario, they would capture this, you would get castled, and they would get greedy and capture this, winning you the game on the spot with this knight to b3 discard check, picking up the rook on the next turn. But this is not very likely to happen. People are here in this position finding the correct response with bishop to e3. But now you can play knight to f5, counter-hitting their bishop, and of course your opponents are bishop lovers, so they want to preserve it. So they will most likely play it back to d2. Now you can get castled, and in this position you can pretty much expect your opponent to self-destruct with something like bishop captures on b4, resulting in a -2 evaluation of this position, or like trying to develop light square bishop, which is also -2. Or if they play like this guy, 2200 played bishop to d3, which just hangs a bishop. Or there is knight to b5 played. In this position, you can harass the knight. They should ignore this and try to counter hit your knight on the other side of the board. But I can just imagine people would be playing knight to c3 here. Now you can play knight to d4. And the idea is that you want them to try to harass your knight, in which case you can respond with knight to b3 hitting the rook. The rook has only one square to move to and not be captured, it is b1, but now you can capture this pawn, totally ignore that your knight is hanging, because if they do capture this, you capture again, and now you are getting this spin going on with double attack on this dark square bishop. And yes, they can try to protect it with their knight, but you can actually just capture on b4 with the bishop, putting another piece to the pressure. Okay guys, let's go all the way back where we started. So they played pawn to c4, if you remember, it was like 1000 years ago. We played knight to b4, and we have only been discussing what happens after knight to a3. Now it's time to have a look at the correct response, which is moving the king. Well, let's actually start with king to d2, because in this variation they are very likely to fall for another trap. So we can continue with knight to c6, hitting the d4 pawn, and most guys are going to play pawn to a3, trying to harass our knight, which we don't care about, and we are going to capture on d4. Oh, let's turn on this stockfish here. So 93% of the time people captured the knight, got forked with the knight to b3 check, and after king to c3 and capturing the rook, they will do anything they want to clear these pieces away and get your knight trapped in the corner. Yeah? So let's see how that works for them. So bishop to f4, developing with the tempo on our c pawn, so we can get a long castle to cover that. And here in this position, like either bishop to d3 or knight to d2, both of these moves can be countered with pawn to g3, a very nice idea of bringing the bishop here with a check, saving the knight eventually. But look at this, they have this move bishop to e5, so they want to, stop this. Well, in this case, we have this nasty trick, bishop to h6, and if they take the rook, this is checkmate. Woohoo, yeah, very nice and funny trap this. Okay, let's go back. So a funny trap after king to d2. Let's see, king to d1. So in this case, I recommend you to still continue with knight to c6. And again, the most common variation are going to at least win us a pawn. So here people are trying to harass the knight. Now we have to go to this awkward knight to a6. And after that, like half of the people are going to play bishop to e3, not realizing that the pawn is actually not covered by the bishop. Well, technically it is, but we are going to sack the knight, get castled, and there is no way they can save the dark square bishop as it is now pinned and attack. So, well, another variation where we win at least a pawn and have a nice position. Okay, let's now go back and let's see not the pawn to c4, but the second most played move, and it is bishop to c4. So in this variation, we are going to simply put our bishop to b6, counter hitting the bishop, and as you can see, 86% of the players are going to go bishop to b3. Here I recommend to continue with knight to c6. We are now hitting the d4 pawn, so quite naturally, like most guys are going to play pawn to c3, supporting this pawn, creating a nice chain. And we can immediately play pawn to e5, breaking the chain of theirs. So they are going to capture this, we are going to recapture, and fun fact, 10% of the times people simply hang their bishop with bishop to f4 and got forked like this, winning us the game. So of course they need to get castled, which happens like almost 90% of the times. We are also going to get castled, and in this position, here is where they play bishop to f4. Now we can play knight to d3, hitting the bishop, and all of a sudden they can realize that this pawn is unprotected. So I believe one of two things are going to happen. They can either get scared of losing the pawn and they will move the bishop right back to c1, or the other half of the people are probably going to just park the bishop on g3, thinking that it is not very important to hold on to the pawn. So, which one to see first? Let's see the bishop to g3 first, as this one will get to a really cool trap. So now we can go ahead and capture the b-pawn. Yes, they can grab Delsam's one of our pawns, but this is totally fine. Now we can play bishop to c5. And in this position, like the issue that white is facing is the knight is not able to develop here and it cannot develop here. So how are they going to continue with their development? So in 2 out of the 3 games that happened in this position, people came up with the move pawn to a4. So trying to maybe go for some pawn storm, opening up the rook. Also now their knight is allowed to jump to a3 at least. So looks like a quite natural thing to do. Well, here we are going to continue with the rook to f8, hitting the bishop. No problem, says white. They have this move, bishop to e6 check. So, moving the bishop with the tempo on our king, we are forced to move over. And why wouldn't they just continue with their plan of pushing the a pawn? So pawn goes to a5. Now we can go knight to c4. In this position, this one guy played pawn to a6, and look at this move we have. We have a killing move, a beautiful one, knight to e3. Such a nasty move.
Did you capture it? Just let it slip.
Like, what would you do in this position if you were white? Would you capture it or would you let it slip? So if you would capture the knight, then bishop captures with the check. You cannot move the king over because that's checkmate. So you would have to block this with your bishop, but then rook captures the bishop. Again, you cannot capture this. You get Gandalf mated. That's how I call this type of checkmate. Yeah, so nothing works for white in this position. And if you don't capture the knight, then your rook is hanging, so maybe you would like to move the rook over. Well, then you get forked. And if you move the rook to the other available square, you still get the rook pretty much trapped. Poor white in this position, poor white. Yeah, such a nasty move, knight to e3. I love this. Okay, let's go back. So how about they don't play bishop to g3? Let's say they play bishop to c1 and try to hold on to the pawn. In this case, you just go bishop to c5 and it is just so hard to do anything for white here. Like, what do? They play bishop to e3, move the bishop for the third time, or then you just capture this and, well, this is -2 for black. Let's see some other moves like bishop to c2, try to hit the knight. Well, the knight is already protected anyway, so you have all the time to just develop your last piece, and this is once again almost -2 for black. And what else is there? Like knight to d2? Well, big mistake. You capture the bishop and now, well, pretty much the knight is unprotected and you are winning a piece just like that. And if they go ahead and play, for example, greedy and capture the f7 pawn, well, then you can capture on f2. If they capture, you capture with the knight, and now they cannot capture back because they get themselves a pinned light square bishop and you are winning once again. In every positions, the tactics are working very nice for black in this opening, I can tell you that. Let's go back. So how about they don't play bishop to f4? The second most played move is knight to d2. Well, again, you can continue with knight to d3, and they need to be mindful of your tactics. Like, for example, bishop captures on f7, a free pawn runs into knight captures on c1 and winning the knight on the next turn. Okay, guys, let's go back. I'm pretty sure I'm missing some traps that I had on my mind before recording this video, but let's go all the way back and now let's discuss the last variation where they didn't want to quickly exchange the queens but played bishop to e2. Well, in this case you are going to continue with knight to c6. Here most guys play pawn to c3, trying to be solid. Well, you can go ahead and play pawn to e5, and well, very likely what is going to happen is they are going to exchange both of these things. So either they start with d captures on e5 or they start with queen captures on d5. Either way, it is going to transpose to the same thing. Here you recapture with the knight, and most guys are capturing the queens here. So we get this position. Now, throughout this video, we could see how deadly these two slippery knights can be, and this variation is going to be no different. These two knights in the middle of the board are just controlling so many squares that, yes, white has a bishop pair, but they cannot even like develop the bishops in any meaningful way. Like they can develop the bishops here, and that's it. Then that makes no sense for them. So let's see some common lines here. So in this position, most guys are getting castled, like almost 90% of the time. We are also going to get castled, and now like bishop to d2 is the most played one, but also there is rook to e1, rook to d1, that's d1. So just quickly, rook to e1, you want to play bishop to c5. You have a nice target on the f2. And what is going to likely happen next is they play knight to d2. Knight to d2 always gives you the square knight to f4 for your knight, as it is no longer covered by the bishop, so remember that. Oh yeah, let's turn on this stockfish. So we are going to go knight to f4, and now they need to be like, again, super careful with what they do. And the best move is to just go knight to f1. What a ugly move. If they go like this guy went knight to e4, they are done. You can capture this, it is a check. They cannot capture back because of checkmate. Or the same would go if they go knight to b3, trying to harass the dark square bishop of yours. Just losing moves all over the board for white. For example, like bishop to f1 was played. Just nothing seems to be working for them well. The same is if they start with the rook to d1. Again, it's bishop to c5, targeting the f2 pawn. You see, like, the correct response here for them is to move the king to f1 for some reason. I guess to get out of the pin and also cover the light square bishop, or I'm not really sure. But again, if they go knight to d2, once again it's knight to f4 for us, and this guy tried to bishop to f3. Totally lost for them. You can capture this, it is a check, and your next plan is to maneuver the rook right here, put so much pressure on their position, and yeah, they are done here. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to go quickly because I don't want to waste so much of your time. Let's go back. So these were just the rook moves. Anyways, the most frequently played move here is knight to d2. Remember, knight to d2 always gives you access to knight to f4. Now they are under attack. I mean, their light square bishop is under attack. So most guys here find the correct move, which is bishop to d1. Let me just quickly show you if they move somewhere else. Like bishop to f3 may seem natural if they are willing to give up the bishop for the knight, which maybe they are not willing. But anyways, we don't want to capture the bishop right away. We want to first go knight to d3. And now we once again have our threat of capturing this bishop and then follow it up with capturing the unprotected knight. So they need to play something to stop that. The engine is suggesting like knight to b3, just to show you knight to e4 gets played most of the time, but it doesn't really matter. The point is, now the knight is not covering the bishop. This is where we want to capture it. They are now having these stupid matryoshka pawns, and the position is great for black again. A funny trap if they go bishop to b5, which is like one of the only available squares for the bishop. You can go ahead and harass the bishop, and they are very likely, I suppose, to play bishop to a4. And now they are lost again because check, and you capture the bishop, and then you capture this knight. Yeah. Just so many traps in this opening, guys. Okay, moving on. What else I wanted to show you? Yes, I remember. So knight to f4, the correct move bishop to d1. Once again, we go knight to f3. We are having again the same tactics with capturing the dark square bishop. Here in this position, people are finding the correct move, which is knight to f3. And now I like this trick. I like bishop to c5. Let them capture the knight, which I guess they are going to do. And now you don't even capture back the knight, you capture on f2. And this is going to be tricky for them to handle once again. So first of all, they cannot capture this because they get checkmated once again. They cannot like go ahead and fork our rooks because that is just not going to work out well for them. This is a discard check. They need to move the king and we get to have some windmill fun. And in the end, I guess after the stockfish is satisfied of giving enough checks, there is some kind of a rook to f8 idea, just curing the whole f file. Anyways, they cannot do that. They have like this correct move, pawn to b4, trying to hit the bishop. Now, if you want to, you can force a draw with a repetition of moves like knight to h3 check and back and forth. But also you can just simply park your bishop back. Now they have again just only one correct move, I believe. And here I would suggest that you just go ahead and play bishop to d4, hitting the rook in the corner. And again, like super tricky for them to handle this. Like, what would they do? This move loses them again. Trying to move this rook would lose them again, and yeah, they would have to capture this. You would capture this. They would capture this. You would capture this. And now they have to go back like that. Of course, they cannot do this because too much activity for our rooks. All right, guys. I think you are all exhausted. So let's just, finish the video here. Yes, okay, there was one other last variation I wanted to share with you, with them going queen to d1. This is just a bad move, handing the advantage to black. Let's just say this about this position. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed my take on the Portuguese Gambit classical variation. Please let me know what you think. And yeah, take care, eat a lot of carrot and have fun. Bye.